Hello and welcome to All About Billings. We are a show dedicated to discovering the people that make Billings a great place to work and live. We will interview local business people, community leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and entertainers and learn from their successes, their failures, and their connection to Billings. I'm your host, Nancy Brook with Billings Best Real Estate. And today it is my pleasure to introduce our guest, Shaylee Green, who is a fellow real estate agent. Now, a little bit about Shaylee. She grew up in Billings, and I know we're going to talk about this, but you really love all outdoor activities in Montana,
Yes.
and she's got a number of them that she enjoys. But her specialty, and the reason I wanted to have her on today, is she is in commercial real estate. She's a broker and is a certified commercial investment manager, which is called CCIM. You can tell us about that. And this designation is the equivalent of a master's degree in commercial real estate.
That's
Well,
correct.
welcome to the show, Shaylee.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, great. Well, let's start by talking about you grew up in Billings. Tell us about your growing up years here.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Hysham, an even smaller town
Oh,
east of
okay.
Billings. Then we moved up to Billings when I was in 4th grade, and we were in Billings Christian School, and I graduated with a whole entire class of 10 students. Back in the day, we won't say what year.
A little later than me, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and then was here for over 20 years and moved all over with my ex-husband. He was military, and then we were brought back to Billings, and then started my real estate career here, and have been working here with my brokering. So
Awesome. Well, and I think the thing that I found really interesting about your background is you actually studied theology. You don't hear a lot of people who go from theology into real estate, and you completed an AA in Christian studies with a minor in humanities.
yes.
So how did you get from doing that into real estate? That sounds like quite the career transition.
You never know where you're going to go. Like,
Yeah.
you just don't know what turn and what, happenings are going to happen in your life. And I didn't know what I wanted to do for college, so I figured I might as well at least do my gen eds and get something that I'm going to use for the rest of my life out of the way. And so I went straight from the, Billings Christian School over to Yellowstone Christian College here in Billings. It was a, seamless place to land as a, freshman in college, and I did that. And then I actually went to study elementary ed. When then you meet your husband and you start a family and you do all the things, and I decided, that wasn't going to be something I wanted to do right away. And I stayed at home with the family for years and years, and then found myself in a position where I needed to file for divorce and had a lot of children to, provide for. And I always had this little twinkle in my eye towards real estate. I would interview every real estate agent I ever met. I always liked people. I always liked sales. I had done direct sales as a stay-at-home mom for over 8 years. So I was very used to meeting and generating new leads and new friendships all the time. I was very comfortable, like, coming into someone's home, counseling them, giving them business, little tips and tricks if they were sponsoring under me. So I just had a soft training in peopling and, direct sales. And I stuck to it. I restarted that business multiple times when we moved around. It served me very well as a mom. I liked being a stay-at-home mom, but I just have that business mindset and building mindset, and I'm obsessed with learning. And I like I said, we had bought a house. That's where the twinkle started, of the interest in real estate. We had bought a HUD home and lived in it in one of our states. We actually in Augusta, Georgia, right in 08 and 09. And that was a whirlwind of a transaction, and at the same time I thought, I could do that. I feel like I could be a real estate agent. I didn't know what it actually took, but everybody thinks I could be a real estate agent.
A lot of people think that, huh?
You get into it and you go, I knew nothing about this field, but my tenacity and grit, just kind of takes over there. But, I would interview people over the years and think about it, but I always had a little bit of fear. No one in my family had done it. I didn't have any experience. I just had sales and peopling. And Shauna, she was over at Keller Williams. Shauna Key, is it?
Yeah.
She did a personality test. Because I was looking at it and what are the classes and how do I get started. She did a personality test on me, and she said, "Oh, you're one of the like top producing kind of personalities. You'd be great in any, you know, financial institution or a real estate company or whatever. Like, you just have that self-motivating, whatever the personality test said, you know, the things. And I thought, well, that's really cool. Well, then right after my divorce, I realized, you know, the ex-husband moved far away. I didn't have a lot of support. My father actually passed away at the same time. So my mom and myself found ourselves without support. And it lit a fire that you could not have put out with any kind of barricade.
Wow.
Climbed over, climbed around, climbed up, you know, figured out childcare, figured out, you know, housing, figured out how to buy my own house, you know, all while brokering and you know, keeping the kids.
Well, and it's not just one kid. You have five children.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people find it challenging to have the young kids at home, and they were younger, of course. You've been at this for a while. And to have the young kids at home and trying to manage the real estate, right? And so you were working in residential real estate, and I think you told me one time that was the reason why you first were interested in commercial.
So I had my 5th pregnancy and thought, I got to do something. And it was like, okay, now's the time to try this real estate thing you've always been talking about and always been wanting to do. The Knoll Morton class came up, and, you know, I interviewed, I think, 3 or 4 different firms in town, and then ended up going with a firm for about 14 months. And I did residential real estate, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10. I'd have to go back and look. I think I did about 8 transactions, and I think I had 6 listings at the time. That I picked up a really weird commercial listing. Like, I had a weird buyer. The buyer wanted me to call on this commercial property, and it ended up being the Ziggy's building that was like 72,000 square feet. I didn't even know how to write the contracts up. I just called around and asked around, and what do I do? And I ended up getting the listing and taking it to the Commercial Brokers Club, and you know, expressing interest amongst the community that I had an interest in doing commercial. And then I interviewed with my firm that I've been with for 6 years, and never really looked back. You know, I jumped from being basically almost a stay-at-home mom into just figuring it out.
And real estate, I mean, a couple of pretty impressive parts. First of all, that you knew enough because you had the kids and you said, I don't really, because in residential real estate, you work evenings, you work weekends, you work all the time, and I'm sure in commercial you do as well, but you're not showing property on the weekends most likely. And so you realized that you needed to have some way to make it with your family. But a couple of things with commercial real estate. First of all, it's a little hard to break into. And I want to say an old boys network, and I'm not saying it's people discriminate against women, but it's just people have been in that industry for a long time, and they know the business owners, and they know the other real estate brokers in town and agents, and that's not an easy thing to break into.
No,
so
absolutely.
I give you credit for that. And then the other thing is, you're a commission only.
Correct.
You know, you didn't have, and you had these kids to support, so it was either you had to do it or you were going to be hungry and homeless.
Yes. So I knew what homeless felt like after the divorce. I had to move in with my mom. I wasn't actually homeless, so I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And when you have that position and you've already experienced, like, I'm like, it doesn't matter how big I build. If I fall back down, I know where that is. So it's not a question mark. I just only have forward to go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a different mindset for sure. And I was used to peopling and sales and market changes and, you know, generating business and then closing deals and filling my pipeline and closing the deals because of the direct sales business. So I was very used to doing my own prospecting and generating, and, you know, I'm actually more comfortable doing that than I'm not the greatest employee. I have a hard time fitting into a box. I'm an out of a box kind of person, and I will work 80 hours a week for my own time versus 40 hours a week for someone else's value of my time.
Yeah.
Because my hours can be worth a lot more than what you're willing to pay me.
So when did you make the decision to transition to commercial? So you had this listing and you started meeting people in the business.
Yeah, and so they were like, do you want to be doing this? Are you interested in this specialty? And I said, I am pounding the door of my current broker to train me and give me information. Yes, I'm very interested. And I interviewed at my firm with the brokers that were there, and they said, well, you're already showing us that you're very interested in this. You're out there chasing deals. We'd like to bring you on. We'd like to have a female on the team. And I was very pleasantly welcomed, and jumped in. Took because I didn't have an MBA. I didn't have some of the things that typically come along with that practice, and so I felt like, well, the one touted best education there is in commercial real estate is your CCIM. So I took the first class like within 3 months, gave me a ton of confidence, a ton of knowledge to, evaluate properties and, look at them the way a broker in that field looks at them versus the more sales approach that I was used to in my direct sales and in residential real estate. It's like just strictly sales. I look at investment analysis and leasing and, rates of return and just a lot of different metrics to selling and that kind of real estate. So I got just, fire hose soaked in the world of the education, and that gave me the confidence. And then having a team with more experience than myself to I'd go out and I'd get a deal and I'd bring it home and to the brokerage, and they would, we'd train each other and help each other out. So
oh, that's helpful. So how long did it take you to start getting your feet under you? Because like you said, you had the one deal.
Yeah.
You kind of didn't know what you're doing, so you got yourself situated, organized, trained, you got mentors around you. But it must have taken a minute to get a little momentum.
I jumped in October of, I got my license, I think, in July of 17, switched to commercial in August of 18, and I think I closed $1 million in the first quarter. I had a $400,000 mobile home park, and I had a $600,000 industrial building. And I learned real quick how difficult these transactions are and how to evaluate them and work with the appraisers and work with the insurance agencies, and the financing is all completely different and how it's allocated. And Phillips 66 was the buyer on one of them. I'm working with corporations now with entity names, and so I'm like, oh, this is great. This is, and then it was 2020 and everything screeched to a halt.
Right.
In that, the first 2 quarters of that next year had almost 0 commissions, and then it ramps up at the end of the year. It is volatile, and my deals, the deals can take a year to close. You can have something listed for 2 years. I had one deal that was a $1 million deal, and it took 12 months. It was under contract because we were waiting on DEQ. Leasing is different. So doing a lease is kind of like a little tiny sale. So it's like little tiny little sales, medium-sized sales.
Sure.
Anywhere from a $50,000 lease to a $150,000 lease, consider that a sale, and then consider what your fee would be. So you do those all the time, sprinkle those, and then you get your, other ones, and then you're learning industrial properties, retail properties, office properties, investment properties, mobile home parks, land development, tower developments and how they're leased and sold. So each one you grab, you take your classes, you figure it out, you do your research and know your numbers.
Well, and if I remember right, you said you've always been a numbers person, right?
So what's funny is I actually took remedial math in college, and I was terrible at math, but when you get paid to do it, it makes math much more interesting.
Okay.
And I've always geeked out on business and economics.
Okay, economics.
So learning, getting the algebra of constantly doing that, and spreadsheets and Excel sheets and, tax returns and business tax returns came after I was already self-employed myself, looking at self-employment tax returns, and my family was self-employed. And looking at all those kinds of things, I just kind of am fascinated with. And I mean, I'll geek out over a 200-page tax return if I try to figure out what the business is worth. It's just I'm wired a little goofy that way.
Well, that's good though, right? Because it fits for your business.
Oh yeah, yep. I love to negotiate. I love, a win-win. A lot of our to get a deal done, you really have to have a win-win. It's less of this like two people in the corners. We're trying to find a number and find something that works for the seller and the buyer, or the landlord and the tenant, and that could involve build out, that could involve lease rates, that could involve special financing, which I love to do, creative financing deals. So it's a little different than like, well, here's the sales price and here's the buyer and I need this done, and by the end of it, they're almost like, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of deals where people are happy in residential as well, but I think I've put a buyer and a seller in a room on a commercial deal before, or a landlord and a tenant, and we're able to just get to terms.
Right.
What's the bottom line? What do we need to do here to make everybody win? So that's kind of a more of a mindset of how I like to be.
Well, what's your favorite part of doing this? So
small businesses.
Okay, so you like
the little guy that doesn't know anything. They're terrified. You know, they've never done a lease before. They don't know how to, you know, create an LLC. They don't know anything about like business financing. You know, they just don't know what they know. They don't know what they don't know. And I love to kind of come in and like offer consultation and, you know, steer them in the right direction. I was able to put off the main deli from the Heights down in that kitchen on 27th. And it's like so satisfying because she was struggling in her space in the Heights. There's not other locations in the Heights. I said, well, you're going to have to open up your mindset. I have a kitchen on 27th right across from the hospital. I think it'd be really good for you. We toured it, you know, able to do deals like that. And it just, you know, that probably feels the most good because I was the little guy. I was the underdog. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't come from education or, you know, pedigrees, and had to just figure it out.
Well, it sounds like you really get a kick out of consulting with businesses, even more than, I mean, obviously you do real estate deals along the way, but it sounds like you really are more than just a real estate transaction manager.
Yep, I'm going to be adding more consulting, I think, into my you know, field of practice as another pillar of my business, because I do know how to point people into, you know, get them down to Rock 31 and go build your business plan, or I do know how to, you know, here's how you should be allocating your tax returns. You know, here's the Secretary of, you know, website of state where you can do an LLC. I'm going to be learning how to do it, doing business ads. I got to make a DBA for my personal business soon. So that'll be another tool I'll have in the bucket to point someone in the right direction. And, you know, that stuff's exciting. I love seeing, you know, clients find their right property for their business or downsize when they want to retire. I've done some estate planning here and there. You know, I've done some assessments for business owners, like a business partner buyout.
Right.
I've been able to help them contractually buy another partner out and you know, kind of move on in a new direction, and just different things like that. You know, I use a lot of attorneys. I'm not the attorney. I'm not the accountant. I'm not, you know, the same things that we would all say, but yeah, those are like problem solving. I would say at the very end, helping people in problem solving. I'm like, I get paid to do this.
Oh, that's neat.
I get fees for this. This is.
So when did you know you made it? Like you were going to be okay in this field? Because I can only imagine it must just be a little bit, with 5 kids at home, like,
Oh, there were so many hurdles. You know, I'd just get a whole day of appointments lined up or a training or something, and hey, come to the school, your kid tripped on the playground and their front tooth is knocked out, and we got to go to the dentist like today. And I'm like, you know, so on that note, I have had a huge network of people I've relied on for, you know, helping or childcare or housekeeping, or friends, you know, kids that would come over and organize my house when I couldn't get to it, or, you know, all kinds of little things I've been able to develop. But I'd say when I felt like I had reached a place in my career and in my home life was when I bought my house in December of 19, and I just felt more settled. I just felt like I have my own property. I've been in business now 3 or 4 plus years. I feel more confident every time I handle a deal or have a listing. I can price it better. I can negotiate a lease better. I can, you know, I know enough to where I'm confident and comfortable, and my all of it was matching at kind of the same time.
Yeah. Well,
and then COVID hit and the markets go crazy, and then we have the last 2 years and the markets are crazy again. So it's like, what else? Can we have 2 years of just normal?
Right.
Let's bring that into.
Well, and what has been the biggest challenge overall? Starting in this business.
Oh, man. Boy, that's a good question. I would say the nitty-gritty things. There's a little, like, you can always create volume or create, get listings, but the little finessey nitty-gritty things that you only learn with experience, and then getting more and more experience, and then, I know how to handle that one this time. I know how to communicate that way this time. I don't know, maybe something along that line. Yeah.
Like just the details that you didn't know, and then you have to learn, and it can be it can be a little painful sometimes.
Very, very, but you won't ever email that way again, or you won't ever not have that in order again, or you won't ever, miss that date on that thing again, We're all always learning.
Exactly.
Every day, if you're not still learning, I don't know.
Well, and I think when you and I talked, one thing that I find interesting is a lot of time commercial real estate can be a precursor to what's happening in the market. Like, for example, when commercial real estate starts going soft and things are sitting on the market, what's going on with residential? Are people going to be not buying as well? So what's happening in the commercial market these days? Because I don't do commercial, I just do residential.
Yeah, and I love talking about this. It's actually the opposite. Residential leads commercial. So laws and practices like the NAR settlement stuff, that came in through that avenue. Now it's coming into our contracts and our way of practicing is coming into play differently. The residential market of, interest rates, because commercial interest rates are actually points higher typically.
Sure.
So they, what the basis of the market is doing, our rates and our deals actually follow residential, about 6 to 8 months, the markets. And then we have our market cycle, we call it, which you can kind of study if you want to geek out sometime, what's the industrial cycle or what's the office cycle. So we look at like absorption rates on like how many units are out there, how long does it take for those square footage or those units to be absorbed, and how many are going to be built in the coming, so I think you probably look at absorption rates in homes as well, because I see some reports and data coming through. JC Inget, that was at our firm, she would send us a lot of data, and I would always try to, check on how many days out, how many days is it taking for things to sell. We follow you guys. Yep. Yeah, so maybe you're seeing it, the vacancies, like, you're seeing it, but it actually is, the timeline is actually.
So you think the vacancies, like I know during the pandemic, I mean, that was obviously a real unique situation, but things were starting to get soft with commercial, although residential was still going strong. But then, I mean, obviously residential cooled off with increased interest.
And to go back to the barometrics of commercial is, there's 7 or 8 product types, and each product type has its own cycle.
Okay.
So industrial, let's just start there. When I was first leasing, it was $6 a square foot for a base lease. It's it's double now. In 6 years, it's double. It's $12 a square foot for the base lease. For a mechanic who wants to rent a 1,200 square foot shop, it used to be, $850, $900, and now it's $1,500. So these guys, have they doubled their rates, doubled their, so it's just the materials have gone up to build, so that means the lease rates go up, that means the business owners have to charge more, that means, all of those things are affected. Office space took a hit. Office space is, we've got industrial, we've got office space, we've got retail, which is like your malls, your, Panic, I mean, that's quick serve, but I mean, that's another avenue. Quick serve is, each one of them has a little bit of a different market. and you almost have to know all of the
Yeah, and I
products to
guess
see.
probably retail is what I notice most.
Yep,
just
because they're out there, there's
and you
signs.
see the signs, and
Yeah, you're like, oh, that big vacuum store has been vacant. You know, right now we have, 30,000 square foot on King space that used to be Bed Bath and or no, it was is that the Bed Bath and Beyond? Yeah, 30,000 square feet. That's huge.
Right.
That's a big retail space that's going to sit for a while until a perfect, tenant is looking for that footprint.
Well, and the other thing that I think has changed a lot in the business world, just somebody who's been in business for a long time, but back when I started in business, nobody worked from home. And now there's so many people, like even real estate agents. A lot of real estate companies don't even have offices anymore. I have a small office. I have some desks for some people if they want to come work there. But it's not, like a big fancy office like we used to have. Are you seeing that effect of the basically work at home?
Yeah. Even my recent brokerage, the model is some more open spaces, co-working spaces. We got Rock 31 downtown. That's a co-working space. Those models you wouldn't have ever seen before. It's the same thing as like Uber and Netflix. These things that kind of disrupt industries. You're seeing people go, well, I kind of like flexing and sharing with other people that are strangers more. You see those definitely absolutely changing in the office space. Like, and I toured a 40-acre development in downtown Nashville a year ago, and the way people are building, and rooftop grass on top of retail buildings, like the way Google, like work and play while you're at work. A lot of that stuff
keeps them there longer.
Yeah.
And let's give them some dinner while we're at it.
Yeah. Casual clothes. You just see people being more open to different styles of business and living and branding and things like that.
So are you seeing that happen in Billings? I mean, other than, some of the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm seeing some creative things done in some office spaces downtown. We had a owner who owns, 5 different properties downtown, and he was willing to put a daycare in one of his buildings so that the downtown people had support. I wanted to put a dog park in downtown for all the people that have.
Sure.
I wanted to put one on top of a building, but anyway.
Well, we're coming to our end, and I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you if they are interested to talk about commercial real estate. And
yeah, I get calls all the time, people that have questions or want to know, and I work alongside brokers, referrals back and forth. A lot of times I like to just take the deal and say, here's a really generous referral, but
sure.
And I refer residential out all the time as well, because my clients buy and sell homes.
So,
but my phone number, my phone number is 406-208-7723.
Okay.
And I'll be having some new branding coming out soon. So
yeah, I understand some exciting times ahead for you. So we'll have to keep in touch and hear all about it. And it's really been fun talking to you about commercial real estate. I don't get a chance to hear all about your side of the industry.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's high level, it's complicated, but it's approachable.
Yeah.
You just got to know somebody who knows some stuff.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and everyone, it was wonderful to have you, and we hope to see you next time on All About Billings.